Hey everyone, you're about to hear a story about a badge. Not just any badge, but one that unlocked a truth so powerful it quieted an entire classroom, defied expectations, and ignited a fire in a young girl's heart. It's a story for anyone who's ever felt small, been doubted, or been told their dreams were too big, especially if the world around you wasn't built to see your brilliance. This is for the unseen architects, the quiet dreamers, and every single one of us who carries a legacy of overcoming. Get ready, because this is about to hit different. The fluorescent lights of Mrs. Davis's fifth-grade classroom hummed, casting a pale glow over a scene buzzing with anticipation. It was Parents' Day, a glorious, chaotic ritual where childhood dreams met adult realities. The air was thick with the scent of freshly sharpened pencils and nervous excitement, a typical Tuesday just after recess. One by one, kids bounced up their voices, swelling with pride as they unveiled their parents' noble, relatable professions. A dad who tamed flames as a firefighter, a mom who conjured sugary magic at the local bakery, even an older brother who technically didn't count for Parents' Day, but still earned a hearty round of applause for his service in the Army. And then it was Maya Jackson's turn. She was one of the quieter ones, Maya. Not the type to raise her hand just to hear herself speak, but when she did, her words carried a soft, undeniable weight. Today she stood slowly, a small index card clutched in her hand. Her name, a neat purple scrawl across its surface. She looked around the room, her deep brown eyes locking onto no one in particular, and then her voice clear and steady, she said it. My mom is an aerospace engineer at Space Dynamics Lab. For a moment, silence. An odd, heavy quiet. Then a few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Not the kind that explodes all at once, but the kind that spreads in waves, growing louder with each confused or amused snicker. Wait, Space Dynamics Lab, someone blurted from the back. You mean like rocket scientists? Another voice, barely a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the rising tide of giggles, scoffed, She's lying. Even Mrs. Davis's expression shifted. She didn't laugh, but her eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. A fleeting flicker of doubt crossing her face, as if she too found it a bit hard to believe. Maya blinked slowly. She didn't yell. She didn't run. She just stood there, face calm, hands steady. Yes. She repeated, her voice unwavering. She works at Space Dynamics Lab. She designs flight systems and operational strategies for experimental space missions. The words hung in the air, foreign and grand, like they didn't quite belong in a brightly colored classroom. Mrs. Davis, standing near the whiteboard, offered one of those tight-lipped smiles, the kind that silently signals, All right, we're moving on now. Well, thank you, Maya, she said, already scanning her clipboard. Okay, next up, we have Owen. Maya sat back down, ignoring the snickers and the nudges. Her fingers curled around the hem of her shirt, her face still, but her ears burned. Owen started talking about his dad's plumbing business, but Maya barely heard a word. She knew they didn't believe her. Not one of them. Not even the teacher. And here's the thing about disbelief, it's rarely just about the facts. It wasn't just the job that sounded impossible to them. It was the person claiming it. A girl with deep brown skin, neat braids, pulled back with a soft pink scrunchie, a hand-me-down backpack with a broken zipper. Her shoes weren't brand new. She didn't have fancy words or a loud voice. So to them, her saying aerospace engineer sounded like pretending, like make-believe. A crumpled piece of paper landed on her desk during Owen's talk. A boy named Theo leaned over and whispered, Does she clean the labs there or something? Maya didn't respond. She didn't cry either. Not then. But when the bell rang and everyone rushed for their backpacks, she stayed in her seat, eyes locked on the classroom door. For the first time, she wished her mom had a different job. Something easier to explain. Something people didn't look at sideways. Still, even then, she didn't stop believing. It mattered. Her mom once told her, Some truths are too big for small minds. You just let them catch up. Maya walked out of that classroom with her head held high, even if her stomach felt tight. She wasn't embarrassed for herself. She was embarrassed for them. But what Maya didn't know was that the lesson wasn't over. Not for her classmates, and certainly not for Mrs. Davis either. The stage was set, and the quiet strength of truth was about to make its grand entrance. The Jackson house sat near the edge of a quiet road in Montgomery, Alabama. It wasn't flashy, but it was clean, painted a pale yellow with green shutters. The kind of place where the porch light was always on before sunset, and the screen door creaked a little when you came in. Maya walked through that door slower than usual, the lingering sting of the classroom's laughter a heavy weight. She kicked off her sneakers, tossed her backpack near the foot of the stairs, and headed straight for the kitchen. The comforting smell of garlic and onions told her mom had gotten home early. Dr. Simone Jackson was standing at the stove, stirring something in a big red pot. She didn't turn around right away. "You're late," she said, not harshly, just noting it. Maya pulled out a chair and dropped into it. "Had to stay back to wipe down the desks," she muttered a flimsy excuse. Simone turned, took one look at her daughter's face, and lowered the flame. "Talk to me," she prompted, her voice soft but firm. Maya didn't speak for a second, her hands fidgeting in her lap, picking at the sleeves of her hoodie. She looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't quite know how to start. "They laughed," she said finally, the words barely a whisper. Simone didn't need to ask who. She pulled out the chair across from her daughter and sat down. No dramatics, no gasp or panic. "Why?" she asked. "I told them you work at Space Dynamics Lab." Simone gave the faintest nod. "And they didn't believe you?" "Nope. One kid said maybe you cleaned the bathrooms." Simone let out a quiet breath. Not quite a sigh, more like a pause to collect herself. "And what did you say back?" "I didn't." Mrs. Davis moved on real fast, like she didn't want to deal with it. That part made Simone's eyebrows twitch slightly, a subtle sign of irritation, but she kept her tone even. "Do you believe you said anything wrong?" Maya looked up quickly. "No." "Then don't wear their ignorance like it's your mistake. They laughed, and that's on them, not on you." They sat in silence for a moment, the bubbling from the pot filling the space. Outside, a dog barked twice and stopped. "You know," Simone said, getting up to stir the food again. "When I first told people I wanted to work in aerospace, my high school guidance counselor told me to be more realistic. Said I should consider secretarial work." Maya looked up, eyes wide. "That was in '98. Simone turned off the stove and faced her daughter again. "Did it hurt?" "Yeah, but it also lit a fire. I wasn't angry at her. I was determined not to let her decide who I could be." This was Simone's way. She always found a way to talk real, but never dramatic. There was a quiet strength in how calm she stayed, a lesson in every measured word. This wasn't just about Maya's day. It was about a legacy of overcoming. Maya smiled just a little. She liked that. It was a truth Maya was just beginning to grasp. Her mother hadn't magically appeared in a high-tech lab. Before she was Dr. Simone Jackson, pioneering flight systems and challenging the limits of space. She was simply Simone Davies, a lanky teenager with glasses too big for her face, growing up in a house with a sagging front porch in Jackson, Mississippi. Her mama worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on, and Simone knew early on she liked machines more than makeup. While other girls played jump rope, Simone built little contraptions out of broken fans and old cassette players. Her uncle once called her odd. She heard different and took it as a compliment. At 13, she picked up a worn library book about space shuttles. She read it cover to cover in one night, every schematic and dream of the stars igniting something deep within her. By 14, she was teaching herself basic programming. She didn't talk much about it at school. She'd learned quickly that saying, "I want to work at NASA," or any equivalent back then, would either get you laughed at or ignored. Her teachers didn't push her not because she wasn't smart. Simone had straight A's in every subject, but because they had already decided what she was likely to become. "You're really organized." One counselor told her, "You'd be great as a receptionist." When she mentioned applying to a summer program for young engineers at Georgia Tech, her math teacher raised his eyebrows. "That's pretty competitive. Are you sure you want to waste the application fee?" She applied anyway, and she got in. That summer changed everything. For the first time, she was surrounded by kids who thought about things the way she did. Notebooks full of questions, curiosity without apology. She came home with a folder of blueprints and a profound sense of direction. But college was another uphill climb. At Auburn University, she was one of only 3 black women in the entire engineering department. In group projects, she was always the one asked to take notes instead of solve equations. Professors mispronounced her name even after 3 semesters. She didn't complain. She just kept showing up. Simone worked nights at a diner near campus and tutored high school students on weekends. There were times she thought about giving up, not because she couldn't handle the work, but because it was exhausting trying to prove she belonged. One spring, after acing a thermodynamics midterm, she overheard 2 classmates whispering behind her back. "She must have had help," one said. "Maybe she copied from someone," the other added. She didn't confront them. She didn't cry. She just went home, opened her textbook, and started preparing for finals. When the semester ended, she ranked first in her department. No one could say it out loud, but they saw it. After graduation, she interned at Lockheed Martin. Then came the application to Space Dynamics Lab. A shot in the dark, she thought. But her resume stood on its own. She got the call in March while sitting in a laundromat with a basket of wet towels and 1 working dryer. Her mama cried on the phone for 5 whole minutes. From there, the real work began. The meetings, the designs, the late nights, the small stares in conference rooms, the moments when she had to repeat herself 3 times to be heard. But she never stopped speaking up because every time she sat at a console or sketched a new idea, she remembered a younger version of herself who only needed 1 person to believe it was possible. And now when she walked into her daughter's 5th grade classroom with that official badge swinging from her neck, she wasn't just representing herself. She was standing in for every girl who'd ever been told, "People like you don't do that." But this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about planting something new in her daughter that couldn't be shaken. "You know," Simone added casually, pulling Maya back to the present, "I could come to your class. Parent Day is this Friday, right?" Maya blinked. "You'd do that? I get the day off anyway and it might be fun. But what would you wear?" Simone grinned. "I was thinking maybe my Space Dynamics Lab badge. And that black blazer you hate." Maya's eyes lit up. "Okay, yeah. Do that." "Thought so." They both laughed, now real from the belly kind of laughter. The air in the kitchen felt lighter. Simone served them both bowls of stew and set them on the table. As they ate, she told Maya stories about her first job interview and the time she accidentally spilled coffee on a flight simulator keyboard. The stories made Maya giggle, and she no longer felt small. She felt lucky. "Remember," Simone said as they finished, "you don't owe anyone proof. But if the moment comes when you feel like showing them, just know I've got your back." Maya nodded slowly, cheeks full of food. "And your badge," Simone smirked. "That too." But she wasn't coming just to make a point. She was coming to shift the entire room. Maya just didn't know it yet. The stage was set for a confrontation of disbelief, an unveiling of truth, and a quiet revolution that would resonate far beyond the classroom walls. Friday arrived faster than Maya expected. All week, whispers still floated around the classroom like dust in sunlight. A few kids tried to apologize in awkward ways. One offered her a crumpled fruit snack. Another muttered, "I was just joking." But most of them acted like nothing had happened. That was fine by Maya. She hadn't forgotten. By the time the morning bell rang, the classroom buzzed with a nervous anticipation. Mrs. Davis had rearranged the desks into a horseshoe-making room for parents to sit and present. She wore a purple blouse and had put out a tray of sugar cookies she clearly bought from a grocery store. A weak attempt to make the event feel festive. Maya sat near the middle, her backpack neatly tucked under her chair. She was nervous, but not in a scared way. It was a waiting kind of nervous. She hadn't told anyone her mom was coming. The first parents walked in around 9:15 a.m. A man in a mechanic's uniform. A woman in scrubs. A few moms with tote bags and Starbucks cups, who smiled and waved a little too hard. The presentation started. There was clapping light laughter. One dad told a story about fixing a sink that exploded. Another mom talked about teaching yoga to toddlers. Maya kept glancing at the door, a knot tightening in her stomach with each passing minute. Then, just as Mrs. Davis was introducing the next speaker, it opened. Dr. Simone Jackson stepped into the room. She wore that black blazer Maya couldn't stand. Tailored and crisp, a stark contrast to the usual school day casual wear. Her ID badge with the official Space Dynamics Lab logo hung from a navy lanyard, catching the light as she moved. Black slacks, no jewelry except for a sleek silver watch. Her expression was calm, not smug, not flashy, just present. The room went quiet in a blink. Even the air felt still. Mrs. Davis, who had been mid-sentence, stammered, and trailed off, her mouth slightly agape. Maya, seeing her cue, stood up. Her voice, clear and steady, filled the sudden void. "This is my mom, Dr. Simone Jackson." Mrs. Davis blinked, her lips parted, then forced a smile. "Right, welcome. Would you like to tell us about your work?" Simone gave a polite nod. "Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm an aerospace systems engineer at Space Dynamics Lab. I work on mission planning, flight systems integration, and operation strategy for our experimental space programs. We're looking at things like how to sustain life in deep space environments for extended periods." Several heads turned toward Maya, then back to Simone. A few mouths hung open. One kid whispered, "Whoa." Simone continued, not rushing, her voice having a rhythm to it. Clear, smooth, grounded. "Most of my job involves designing systems that allow astronauts to travel safely in space. We look at everything from how they breathe, to how data is transmitted back to Earth, to the structural integrity of a habitat on a celestial body." She paused, letting it settle. Then a subtle shift in her gaze. She scanned the room, her eyes meeting various bewildered stares. "I didn't come here to impress you, though," she added, her voice gaining a new quiet power. "I came here because my daughter said she told you what I do, and some of you didn't believe her." Silence. Maya's heartbeat was loud in her ears. She didn't dare blink. Simone stepped closer to the whiteboard and gently tapped on a printed diagram she'd brought. A real schematic from a past project. It was complex, filled with lines, numbers, and unfamiliar symbols. "You don't have to understand all of this," she said, her voice softening slightly. "That's okay. But the next time someone tells you something that sounds too big to believe, take a second before you laugh. Because brilliance doesn't always show up in the package you expect." She turned toward her daughter, her eyes warm and direct. "And when someone tells the truth with pride, don't shrink it down. Let it stand." Mrs. Davis cleared her throat a little too loudly. "Thank you, Dr. Jackson. That was very enlightening." Simone smiled a genuine, knowing smile and walked over to sit beside Maya, who was trying not to grin like a fool. The room moved slowly after that. The next parent stumbled through their presentation about running a car dealership. No one laughed. No one whispered. And Maya. She sat up taller than she ever had before. She didn't look around for approval. She didn't need it. Because in that moment, her truth was loud enough to be heard by everyone. But what most of them didn't realize was that the woman they just met hadn't always been listened to either. And her road to Space Dynamics Lab was filled with 1,000 moments just like this one before she was Dr. Simone Jackson. The atmosphere had shifted, yes, but the ripple effect of that truth was just beginning. It was a subtle transformation, a seed planted in the minds of children and adults alike, setting the stage for what was to come. Friday came and went, leaving behind a subtle yet undeniable shift in the atmosphere of Mrs. Davis's 5th grade classroom. The following Monday, Maya walked in not expecting a parade, and she didn't get one. But the air was quieter. Eyes didn't roll when she spoke. Theo, the boy who had dared to whisper about cleaning bathrooms, actually avoided eye contact entirely, his gaze darting away whenever hers came close. It wasn't a sudden dramatic change, but the kind of delicate shift you only notice if you're looking close, like the way light changes just before dawn. At recess, as Maya sat alone near the jungle gym, 2 girls, Chloe and Sam, hesitantly walked over to her. They stood around awkwardly shifting weight from one foot to the other, a visible internal debate playing out on their faces. "My mom said your mom's speech was really something," Chloe said, chewing on her bottom lip. "She sounded smart, like really smart." Sam nodded vigorously. "I looked up Space Dynamics Lab stuff after school. It's kind of cool." That was all they said, a brief, almost timid acknowledgement. But they didn't walk away right after. They stayed. And for the first time all year, the three of them sat on the bench and talked about something other than snack trades or slime videos. It was a small victory, but to Maya it felt monumental. A quiet re-entry into a world that had for a moment cast her out. Later that day, as the class packed up for dismissal, Mrs. Davis pulled Maya aside. "I wanted to say something," she began, her voice lower than usual, laced with an unfamiliar vulnerability. "About last week." Maya looked up alert. "I should have handled that moment differently." Mrs. Davis continued, her gaze, direct regret etched into her features. "I should have asked more questions, not moved on so fast. I'm truly sorry, Maya." Maya wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't used to adults apologizing like that, not in such a personal, earnest way. She just nodded once, slowly. It was enough for now. The apology was genuine, a small crack in the wall of professional detachment, proving that even adults could learn and grow from their own missteps. But not everyone had a change of heart. Some kids still whispered, but they did it more carefully. Their voices hushed, their glances furtive. A few, like the boy named Dean, looked at her like they were waiting for her to mess up, just to restore balance in their own heads, to prove their initial judgment right. Dean still muttered "space kid" under his breath every time she walked by, as if trying to chip away at what she'd gained. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She just kept doing her work. She asked more questions in class now. She raised her hand even when she wasn't totally sure she was right, because now, even getting something wrong didn't scare her, not like it used to. One afternoon during group work, she overheard a classmate whisper, "She thinks she's better than us." Maya looked up calmly, her gaze steady, and replied, "No, I just know I belong here." There was no argument after that. The air simply fizzled out of their resentment, unable to contend with her quiet certainty. At home, Dr. Simone Jackson noticed the shift too. Maya talked more at dinner, shared little things about her day without having to be asked twice. And she started drawing again, not cartoons or doodles, but intricate diagrams like her mother's rocket's helmet designs, precise star maps, all in pencil. One evening, Simone found a sticky note stuck on the fridge. It was in Maya's familiar purple handwriting. It read, "I'm going to work there too. Love, Maya." Simone didn't move it for 3 days. This wasn't just about confidence. Something deeper had changed in Maya. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about standing in her own truth, knowing what was real, no matter who laughed. In gym class, when the teacher asked them to write down a goal unrelated to sports, Maya wrote, "Engineer space missions just like my mom." When the teacher read it out loud, no one laughed. They just listened. A quiet respect had taken root, cultivated not by grand gestures, but by the undeniable presence of truth and the quiet courage of a mother and daughter. The ripple effect was subtle, yet profound, transforming the classroom, her friendships, and most importantly, the landscape of Maya's own self-belief. It was a testament to the fact that authenticity, when backed by unwavering conviction, can dismantle even the most ingrained skepticism, paving the way for a future written not in doubt, but in dreams. And this quiet transformation was leading to one final anchoring moment between mother and daughter, a conversation that would solidify everything they'd been through. It was Friday night again, a full week had passed since Parent Day, and the Jackson house smelled like Simone's famous lemon chicken. Maya was at the kitchen table, hunched over a new design. Something about a rotating satellite that used solar panels shaped like flower petals. She didn't say much as she drew, just occasionally stopped to erase or squint at an angle. Simone watched from the sink, slowly drying a dish. The way her daughter's concentrated tongue pressed slightly against her upper lip reminded her of herself at 12, always building something inside her head. "You want to take a break?" Simone asked gently. Maya glanced up. "Almost done." Simone smiled and leaned against the counter. "You've been working on that for 2 hours. I know. I just want it to look right." Maya finished the last line and turned the paper toward her mom. Simone walked over and took a closer look. "Explain it to me. Well, it's a satellite, but instead of keeping all the panels flat, they open up like this. She mimicked the shape with her hands, so it can collect more energy when it turns, depending on the angle of the sun. Simone nodded, impressed. That's smart. Where'd you get that idea? I don't know. I was thinking about sunflowers earlier, how they move during the day. It just kind of came to me. Simone sat down beside her, placing the paper gently on the table. You know what I love most about that idea? She asked. What? You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were just trying to solve a problem. Maya looked down at the drawing again. Yeah, I guess I was. They sat there for a minute quietly, the kind of silence that doesn't need fixing. Then Maya spoke again, softer this time. Do you think they really believed me after you left? Simone rested her hand on the table. Some did. Some still don't. That's not something you can always control. So what do I do? You keep showing up. That's the hard part. Not just once, but over and over again. You speak the truth even when it feels like no one hears it. Maya thought about that. Like you did. Simone gave a soft smile. Like I still do. Was it always this hard for you? Maya asked, her voice tinged with a new understanding. Simone leaned back in the chair, eyes thoughtful. Sometimes harder. But I stopped waiting for it to get easy. Maya looked at her mother, not just as a parent now, but as a person, someone who had fought through walls. She never even saw someone who carried quiet power without needing a crowd to recognize it. I used to wish you had a regular job, she said, like something easy to explain. Simone laughed softly. I know. I could see it in your face when people asked. But now I think it's cool. Like really cool. Simone reached out and gently tucked one of her daughter's braids behind her ear. I'm proud of you, you know, she said, her voice a warm embrace. Not because of what you said in class, but because you said it anyway. Maya felt a warmth in her chest, not just pride, but relief. A weight she hadn't noticed until it started to lift. I didn't think you were going to come that day, she admitted. Simone raised an eyebrow. Why not? I thought maybe you'd think it wasn't worth it. Simone paused, then she leaned in closer, her voice firm and steady. Anything that messes with how you see yourself, that's always worth showing up for. They didn't need to say much after that. Maya stood and walked over to the fridge, grabbed a magnet, and pinned her drawing right next to the grocery list. Simone watched, her heart full, but quiet. Not every lesson came with applause. Some just sat there, visible only to the people who'd earned them. But there was one last thing left to say, not for Maya, but for everyone else still learning what brilliance looks like. The next week, during morning announcements, Mrs. Davis did something unexpected. She held up a student submission from the Career Dreams bulletin board and read it out loud to the class. This one is from Maya Jackson, she said. She wrote, I want to build machines that go to places no person has ever been because someone has to figure out how to get us there. And I think I can. There was no laughter this time, just stillness. A few students turned to look at her, not with disbelief, but something closer to respect. Maya sat at her desk, calm, focused, drawing small gears in the margins of her notebook. She didn't need to look up. She didn't need the room to cheer. That wasn't the point. Because this story was never about applause. It was about truth. About being sure of something when everyone else questions it. About what it means to speak boldly, not to be loud, but to be honest. The people in that classroom had seen something they weren't expecting, a woman with credentials, yes. But more than that, a woman who knew who she was, who didn't wait for permission to be heard. And a daughter who watched her walk into a room where belief had already left and still filled it with power. Simone never had to raise her voice. She never had to list her accomplishments. She showed up, and that was enough. But it was Maya who carried the weight of that day. She walked through the fire of ridicule, stood in it, and came out the other side taller. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is believe in yourself out loud, especially when no one else is clapping. And the lesson here isn't just about what job a parent has or how impressive their title sounds. The lesson is about what we teach our children, not with our mouths, but with our actions. When you believe in your child, you give them armor. When you show up for them, you give them courage. When you stand beside them, even for just a few minutes in a crowded room, you show them what being heard actually feels like. And when that happens, when a child feels seen, not just by a teacher or a classmate, but by the world, they stop shrinking themselves. They stop second-guessing. They start walking like they've got something important to say because they do. Maya didn't need to convince anyone anymore. She wasn't waiting for the class to believe her. She had already moved on, focused now on what she believed was possible. That's what makes stories like hers matter. Because for every kid who's laughed at, dismissed, or talked over, there's another moment waiting when the door opens, when the badge flashes, when silence becomes respect, and it stays with them. Maya didn't need to convince anyone anymore. She wasn't waiting for the class to believe her. She had already moved on, focused now on what she believed was possible. And that's what makes stories like hers matter. Because for every kid who's laughed at, dismissed, or talked over, there's another moment waiting when the door opens, when the badge flashes, when silence becomes respect. And it stays with them. At the end of that school year, in their memory book, under Maya's photo, someone had written, "Most likely to launch something into space." She smiled when she saw it. Not because it sounded cool, but because this time they actually meant it. That quiet truth, that unseen victory was hers to keep forever. So the next time a child tells you something bold, don't rush to doubt. Don't reduce them to what you understand. Let them grow beyond what you expect. And if you're a parent watching this show up, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it counts, believe them out loud. This is the enduring legacy. This is how unseen victories are truly won. If this story moved you, let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your ideas for creating a more inclusive world. Drop your experiences in the comments below. How have you used your voice or actions to challenge prejudice? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire challenge and bring us closer together.